Pod. Welcome back, Pod, to another episode of Say Who Say Pod. He's Danny O'Neil. I'm Christian Caple. The Washington Huskies are 5-1 after a 38-19 victory over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights on Friday night at Husky Stadium. They travel to Ann Arbor, Michigan tomorrow, as it is. Another Thursday trip for a trip that far. 9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff. Don't call it 9 a.m., though, Jedd Fisch says. It's 12 p.m. They're focusing on local time.
Tried to do it all week, right? Taking a page out of the Seahawks book. How you go east. Get your body clocks adjusted.
You've written a number of those stories, I bet, because that was like a thing during the Mike Holmgren era, especially. Am I remembering right? That like
Yes.
10 a.m. Pacific time kicks on the East Coast were not friendly to them?
No. And look, I have written extensively about this and how it was. Some have assumed it is an insurmountable fact. And if you go back and look through history, you'll see that it's just always real, and feeling that the NFL should recognize that and slant schedules accordingly. And then you see most recently, first under Pete Carroll and then now under Mike Macdonald, where the Seahawks have become very successful in the early window starts. And now it's about the process that they've used to master that. I believe there is something to body clocks. I think that's a real thing, but I also think that it's mostly about getting guys in a mental space where they do not sort of give themselves that out, that they are able to boot themselves into a competitive mindset. In general, I think too much gets made of it, and the reality is that when you have a better team, you have a better chance of winning in the early window, because you have a better chance of winning on the road because you have a better team.
Well, I can pretty much guarantee you that there's one team that's not concerned about body clocks, Danny, and it's the team at Chuck Olsson Kia in Shoreline. This episode, of course, is brought to you by Chuck Olsson Kia with a friendly, low-pressure sales staff and a competitively priced selection of vehicles. Our good friends at Chuck Olsson Kia have been locally owned and operated since, not 2004.
1965!
1964. Don't short them.
Oh, 1964!
All the way back to 1964. Owned and operated by a family of University of Washington graduates. If you do check out Chuck Olsson Kia in Shoreline, you better ask for our guy, Henry Olson. And if I find out you went and you didn't ask for Henry, I'm not going to be real pleased about it, Danny, to tell you the truth.
Well, yeah. I mean, they are laying themselves out on the line to support a local podcast. And if that local podcast produces local customers who go to a local business and they don't tell them, how are they going to know that their advertising is working?
If you talk to Henry, tell him Say Who Say Pod sent you.
Say who?
Thanks to our friends at
Say
Chuck
Pod.
Olsson Kia. Strange game on Friday.
Yes, but it made sense in retrospect to me.
It did.
Rutgers is the team that has had a bye, and playing on Friday night is going to be less of an adjustment for them because they've basically been gearing up for this for 13 days, and they came out of the chute pretty hot, and it took Washington a little while to get going. But I think ultimately Washington's talent, specifically at the skill position, specifically at quarterback, ultimately came through. They rushed the passer pretty well, but they didn't have a long-term answer for Damon Williams.
Yeah, and only one sack, too. They did. So one takeaway from that game that I'll be monitoring. How concerned do you think people should be about the medical tent action for Washington's starting quarterback in the fourth quarter? He was made available for interviews after the game. He said, I'm all good, just had to get checked up. He did go back in the game for the 3 kneel downs at the end. Jedd Fisch said, I asked him about it on Monday. He said, he's all good. He'll be practicing full go. So I don't think there's any reason to think that this will affect whether or not he is on the field as their starting quarterback. But there's more nuance to bumps and bruises and potential injuries than just, is he playing or not? We went through this with Jake Browning throughout most of his career. I think he was certainly far more beat up really from his sophomore year on than people knew. And it was only in retrospect that you kind of found out what he went through to get ready to play every week. There was a surgery somewhere in there too. And that's just kind of how it is in football. I think there's a number of guys like that at a number of positions on every team and every game. I don't know. He scrambles for 30 yards, right? The play the injury happens on, or at least appeared to happen on, is kind of classic Damon Williams, right? He scrambles for a 30-yard gain, which, as Jedd Fisch correctly noted, that was most of his runs in this game were not scrambles. There was a lot of design stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Scrambles for a 30-yard gain, kind of gets hit midair, lands. You can see him before the next couple plays, kind of like trying to get his shoulder loose. And then he runs for a touchdown and goes up. And I don't know that he got hit that hard, but he sort of landed on his hip, I think. And he's up and celebrating, and he always bounces right back up. But then he's in the medical tent after that, and clearly kind of trying to work that right shoulder or collarbone or whatever area. I don't know. It's something to, I don't mean to be alarmist or anything, but I think it's something to keep an eye on.
I'm more worried about left tackle than I am about quarterback in terms of health, but that doesn't mean I'm not concerned about. And I think you're right to say that there are degrees of injury. I'm not worried about him not playing. I'm certain that he's going to play. I'm worried that, and especially when we're talking about his throwing shoulder, that his accuracy might be affected. I think he took a pretty stiff hit. I think it is the scramble and not the touchdown that it happened on, and I think he's probably pretty sore. And this is his second year of college football, and this might be the most pain he will have played with and through. And that's part of the reality for high-level football players, is they have to learn how to adjust and perform well when they're not 100%. So it's one of those where I'm not worried that he's not available, but if he doesn't look as accurate, I'm not assuming that he's going to be as accurate this game as he was the first half of the season. I guess that's the best way to say it.
I mean, say this, like if he comes out and isn't super sharp, doesn't look like Damon Williams has looked for most of this year, everybody's going to immediately go to, oh, he's hurt.
Yeah, and I would say don't assume that how he starts is going to be how he ends. Don't assume if he doesn't look great at the beginning that that's going to be it for the whole game.
Because he could settle in.
Yeah, it could settle in. He's going to be trying to find ways to be effective given what he has. So I would say that. Don't freak out and say, oh my God, all is lost. You're going to be looking for solutions. You're going to have to problem solve as it goes, if that's the case. And hopefully it won't be. But
yeah, maybe he's completely fine. Maybe there's, if he hadn't gone into the tent, then no one would ever even know that he was banged up. But
injuries are always more serious. That's our rule, right? It's always more serious than they're letting on.
Pretty good 6 quarters for Damon Williams Jr. since halftime of the Maryland game.
He's looked incredible.
It was Tuiasosopo-esque against Rutgers.
Yes.
I'm not ready to move it past that game in terms of like all-time dual threat performances, considering that Stanford team in 1999 won the league.
Yeah.
And Rutgers is
special.
Not quite that. But 402 passing yards, 136 rushing yards, and I think you got to give him 9 back for lost yards on sacks, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it wasn't quite 9. Some number. He got sacked once. So it was actually a little bit more than that. I had been wondering how much designed run we were going to see for Damon Williams Jr. And to this point, it hadn't been like a ton. I kind of wonder if the offensive staff, if Jedd Fisch came away from the Maryland game and Jonah Coleman had 18 carries for 57 yards or something like that, and thought, you know what, teams are really scheming for Jonah. Sure seems like some zone read stuff could free up that quarterback who might run a sub 4.40. And man, that first play of the game, I mean, if ever there were an example of a defense absolutely keying on the tailback, and we're going to load up the box, and this running back is not going to beat us, and collapsing on him on the give. I mean, I think Washington was almost surprised there was nobody there. Like, look how hard Decker DeGraff had to look for someone to go block on that play. Like, he had the responsibility of getting the first body on a guy, and there was no one there to put a body on. So um, there have been a few instances of that. I do wonder, like, and Fish and Jimmy Doherty both kind of made this point, like, you could look at the box scores of these games and just cut out everything else and just look at running back production. And you might think, oh my gosh, like, what's wrong with the running game? What's wrong with Jonah Coleman? And they've both pointed out, I think correctly so, like, hey, when it's designed, the quarterback run is also part of the run game. Like, you don't get credit
100%.
for shutting down Jonah Coleman if Damon Williams takes a bunch of huge chunk plays off.
It is one of the great values, and you see it in the NFL now, the value that comes with a quarterback who's able to move. Now, there's not as many designed quarterback runs in the NFL, but it absolutely is. What the entire game of football is based on your offense doing one of two things, right? Either overpowering an opponent who knows what's coming, or taking advantage of where they've allocated their resources and essentially tricking them, right? And this is a huge part of their run game right now. And it also shows a level of adjustment on the part of the coaches. I think Jed and Jimmy Doherty have done a great job so far this season in terms of their offensive game plans and having room to grow and taking advantage of things and frankly making adjustments as things go along. The offense has looked fantastic. And I mean, going back to the game against UC Davis where they score on every possession, and now that opponents are adjusting to what they've done, Washington has counterpunches. It's a great. It's not a problem. It is taking advantage of the success and then counterpunching when opponents adjust.
How many points do you figure they've left on the field against Rutgers the last 2 years?
It's a great question. Probably 30. If you were
Yeah,
going to
it's
say
up
what
there.
is the max that they put themselves in position to score, there's probably 30 points out there that simple, straightforward execution would have got them if they hadn't made mistakes.
1,100 yards of total offense against Rutgers in 2 years and 56 points.
I do find it satisfying. Now that James Franklin is out at Penn State, I believe that Shiano might be my least favorite Big Ten coach. He annoys me so bad. I think he's this wannabe tough guy, and the fact that Washington has just run circles around his defense is thoroughly entertaining to me.
It's not to detract from Damon Williams' performance or anything, but it is not a good defense. 134th in FBS in yards per play allowed, I believe. They'll give it up. And yeah, if not for a fumble on the 3-yard line that was at the end of a very good play, another very good run by Damon Williams Jr. You could call that 45. Grady Gross misses a very makeable field goal. Call that 48. And, it's college football. You're not going to execute on every single scoring opportunity. So it's not like we should give them 100% of their opportunities. But
those were pretty clearly stubbing your toe, though, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty clearly. It's not a matter of, oh, if these three things went right, they score a touchdown on this drive, or it's like, no, that was pretty straightforward. They just sort of flamed out right at the cusp of accomplishment.
And that's why I do think Jedd Fisch is right to say, like, this is going to go maybe in the same bucket as Maryland as far as a slow start, but the way he put it, he's like, look, we drove right down the field on our first possession. The first snap was an explosive run play for the quarterback that wound up being a theme of the whole game, and they stalled out and they missed a field goal. But he's like that, in so many words, like, look, we knew we were going to get ours from the first play of this game. It was just about like settling in and not making self-inflicted mistakes. So are you encouraged at all that, like, in a single offseason, there does now appear to be like a pretty sizable gap between Washington's talent and Rutgers' talent? Because this is a team they lost to last year. This is a team that finished the regular season with the same record as them, or did they win 7? And you could say they were better last year, Like everything but the final score about that box score in New Jersey last year tells you that, Washington should have won that game.
Yeah, but the reason they lost, I mean, there was the stupid penalty on the field goal, but their red zone was awful. And I consider that sort of red zone execution that's on you. Your offense has to make those plays. They did outplay them. But I also feel like the turnovers in this game were different than the reasons that they lost last year. Last year, it was really a matter of their offense wasn't able to score when they got in close. And I think a lot of that related to the struggles that they had up front. But yeah, I am encouraged. I'm still, and maybe this is sort of picking at a nit, I am worried in the short term about the left side of the offensive line. And I do think in a game against subpar defense that it still looks like they have a hard time without Carver Willis out there. And you can tell me from facial expression judgment, but it didn't sound to me like they expect either Willis or Mills back this week.
Yeah, hard to parse. It seems, and again, I'm like, we're really reading between the lines here. It kind of seems like Durfee might have a better chance than those guys of getting back.
Which surprises me because of coming out of that game, I thought that Durfee was the most likely to be done for the year. But I would tend to echo, just reading between the lines of how Jed Fish has talked about it. It does sound to me that Durfee might be closer.
He post game kind of made a point. It seemed like there's a good chance that those guys are going to be back, like at some point. I asked him flat out if they were long-term injuries, and he said no, they don't think so. It's hard to say. Like it's hard to know how seriously to take it when you've got some data last year of like, well, Quentin Moore wasn't supposed to be serious either, and he wound up being out for the season. And but with like when he knew Jacob Manu was ready and was going to play, he pretty strongly implied that. And so it does seem like he's talking about them like they're getting healthier, right? We talked about last week. It sure seems like they're talking about Dakario Davis in a little bit of a different way. And then what do you know? He's not even listed as questionable. I thought he'd be listed. So my official kind of prediction was he'll be listed as questionable and he'll play. He wasn't even listed as questionable. So I'm not like, I'll be pretty surprised if either Carver Willis or John Mills plays against Michigan, but we'll just have to wait and find out. 2 hours before the game, we'll get the availability report.
Am I overreacting to what I saw on the left side of the line? And also going back and watching it again, there are plays where it's clear that Maximus McCree is blocking at the second level. He's letting a guy go by, and that's not him missing a block. Like that's part of their blocking scheme. But am I overreacting to what I perceived as the ability for opponents to pressure around that side of the line?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest concerns on the team until further notice. Like, I think, did it seem to you like McCree settled in a little bit as the game went along?
For sure, he did. Yes. My question is, if that's happening against Rutgers, Michigan is a big physical line. They always are a big physical line. But yeah, I do think he did settle in.
So, I mean, he just hasn't played a ton, right?
Nope.
Like he got his first start of the season against Maryland, and he had some issues there. We talked about him, especially against Zahir Mathis. That was looked like a mismatch at times. So yeah, what'd you think of Paki Finau playing left guard?
I thought it was better at left guard than at left tackle. My worry was at the edge. I thought Paki Finau looked fine. I wasn't able to observe a noticeable difference between him and Mills.
So I think some of it is those guys just are going to have to play together, and like get a feel for things. But you look, there's a reason they went out and got Carver Willis,
for sure.
Right? I mean, they returned their top. I mean, in terms of what they started the season with last year, their top 2 left tackles on their depth chart, and they decided that they needed a veteran to start over those guys. So, I think that you hope to get Carver Willis back as soon as you can, and you just kind of got to string it together in the meantime. And I think there's some good reps by McCree too, and certainly the coaching staff is not putting it all on him. But yeah, I mean, the day you get Carver Willis back is going to be a welcome sight. He's a leader for that group. I mean, just throw out his ability and his experience. Like, he's a 6-year senior who, is effectively a professional at this point. And so guys rally to him. He's old, like he's been around. That's a valuable presence at the most important position on the offensive line, right? And so you take
He's
that
been their
out.
best lineman. He's been their best lineman.
Yeah, no. Also the fact that he's the best player on the offensive line.
He does have some grown man strength though, where you just look at him, it's like his dad last year in the playoffs. I think it was the Boston Celtics were like yelling when Al Horford would go up for him. He has 4 kids. As for his dad's strength, I know that Carver Willis doesn't have 4 kids, but the same sort of thing. Like, he's dad strong. That's real man strength.
Who had more pressures in this game, Rutgers or Washington?
Oh, Washington did for sure, right?
Yeah, by 2, so it was close. At least by PFF standards, had Washington for 13, and they got to Kelly McManus 3 times. Bryce Butler was credited with 2 of those. One of them, and I'm not saying he doesn't deserve credit for it, but one of them he kind of like was that weird play where he sort of like stumbled down. But it was because he had him, right? Yeah. He had him dead to rights. He had him cornered.
Washington's defense is looking better compared to the first game panic I had when Colorado State was running the ball. I think you're seeing a defense that is very sound, that limits big plays, that is improving, and that's despite losing some pretty significant players. Not having Alukta has been a big loss, but I think you've seen growth in this defense. The offense has been great pretty much from the second half of the first game on, and I think the defense, you're seeing it settle into an identity where the number one thing they do is prevent big plays. They've been really good at preventing big plays.
That was so. Ryan Walters was asked about their run defense in particular, because I mean the numbers are really good. I think I like to cite Parker Fleming's advanced metrics. I think they're 16th nationally in defensive EPA per rush, and they're top 20 in yards per rush allowed, I believe, if you want to go with that metric. Tied for 17th with Michigan, in fact. And he was asked about the run defense, and he was like, "Yeah, I mean it's getting better." It's like there were a couple times on Friday I was as frustrated as I've ever been. I think the 51-yard run on their very first play, with first play or second play, he was not pleased with. I think there was a certain safety who did not take the best route to the football there. But like, even if McEllisteen makes that tackle, like he's got what, 20 or 25 yards. Mm-hmm. So said there were some mental errors on that play. I have a feeling that's what he's fixated on coming out of this game. And, like I wrote, you filter that play out, and again, explosives matter. It's not like it just doesn't count. It's not like that's not part of the resume. It was a second play. I wanted to look at it from like a success rate perspective. Their success rate, Rutgers' rushing success rate, was not good in this game, and that's 2 games in a row where an opponent down, rush in, rush out has not been successful getting what it wanted. Now, Maryland can't run the ball
at all.
Antoine Raymond is good.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to, I don't know that I've seen a team upgrade its passing offense the way that Rutgers has with the same quarterback.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Now, they had Ian Strong and KJ Duff last year, but KJ Duff was a true freshman. He's a sophomore. He's friggin' huge. DT Sheffield is kind of the addition, right? I mean, he's that real speed slot receiver who's played a ton of college football. Was at Wazoo for a minute and a half. That's a tough starting trio. It's a bummer of a year for them to not be able to play any defense at all, because they can move the ball.
Mm-hmm. When you have a team like Washington's offense, complementary football matters. The shape of your team matters when you talk about how their defense works with their offense. And the danger for a team like Washington, which has a very explosive offense, I think it's got one of the more explosive offenses for those teams that are sort of outside that top dozen or so, top 12. I'm not going to say Washington has the most explosive offense in the country because I don't think they do. But for those teams that are like Washington is a team that's fighting to be ranked, competing to get to a better bowl game, I don't think there's much doubt about them going to a bowl game. The danger is that they have a terrible defense, that they have a Nick Holt like the year that Keith Price, where they lose to Baylor that you have a defense that just can't stop anybody. So it's literally you've got to go out and score every possession because you're not going to be able. That's not Washington's defense. And we've seen it when they've gone up against good offenses. We've seen it when they've gone up against bad offenses that they're not perfect. I'm not going to tell you it's a dominant. I don't even know if it's an above average Big Ten defense. What I can tell you is that it's a defense that pairs well with this offense because they don't need to hold an opponent to less than 20 points to have any chance of winning a game because Washington will put some points on the board. They've got a defense that, for the most part, it eliminates explosive plays. They're not perfect. Like you said, the 51-yard run off is going to be the kind of thing that makes you slam your head against a table, but they don't give that up on the regular. They're not perfect, but they're good. It's an adequate defense.
Yeah, it's and I wonder how much of it has been Ryan Walters kind of like not getting to do exactly what he wants to do. Where because you think of like Ryan Walters' MO historically, and I don't know that it's like shell, keep everything in front of you, roof on the defense. Right, all you hear about is like, oh, the press man outside, and like he's got to be so fired up to have 2-6-4 corners who can press up, and you can put those guys on an island and all this man coverage. And I think with Tacario Davis being out, like he kind of, and give him credit, right, like for not having too much of an ego of just saying like, well, no, what we do is what we do. I don't care, I don't care what pieces I have. They're going to do what I want them to do. Maybe with Tacario Davis being back, like you see them be a little more aggressive that way. And I think Rutgers was maybe not like the best team to try that against because their only hope of winning that game was hitting you with a bunch of deep shots and scoring in bunches and all that. But interesting to see how their strategy evolves.
I'll tell you what, man, that game looks a whole lot different if Tacario Davis catches that ball that hits him in the number.
Yeah. Or what did you think of the pass interference call on the ball he did intercept?
I can see why they called it. I think it was a bad call, but I can see why that guy called it. Watching it live, I certainly thought that he pulled the guy's waist, and that's why I thought he slingshotted himself off the receiver, and that's how he got there. Watching it on replay, I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that guy came out of his break strong, but I can see why they called it because of how it looked like. But I mean, I'm also not an objective analyst at that point because I'm looking at he's slipping, trying to see the little turf pellets coming up.
What was your viewing setup for this game? So like I've communicated this on my site, but for folks who don't know, I was not at the game on Friday. I had Mariners tickets and I made my decision there, and I'm content with it. But I've watched only replays of this game.
So I skipped back and forth. I had it on dual screen for part of the time, but I would say I watched way more of the Mariners game, probably 75% of the Mariners game, 25%. And if I was going to say how often was it split screen, probably 60% just on Mariners, probably a solid 20% split screen and 20% just on the Huskies. And then I went back and watched the Huskies after the Mariners game because there's no way I was going to sleep for a couple hours.
I've seen a lot of complaints about, and this has been a thing for years, but like complaints about lack of Wi-Fi at Husky Stadium.
Yeah. There's so many other things that I'd like to see him spend money on. I'll just say that. I get it. It's a pain in the butt. It's not great. If it comes down to how I want the program allocating money, getting Wi-Fi hooked up so you can do other things during a college football game when you should be watching the Huskies is lower on my list. This is a once in a blue moon sort of convergence of forces.
So you want them to put that money into an ad campaign to get ranked by the AP voters?
Actually, what I'd like him to do is put more money into the greatest setting in college football ad campaign, which I'm so fond of. Yeah, I try real hard, Christian, not to get wrapped up in poll politics because it feels like something that it feels like you're fighting City Hall when you do it. I'm annoyed that they're not ranked right now. And that's mostly just based on how many other teams. You have 3 teams with 2 losses that are ranked. And Washington is the only Power 4 team that's 5-1 that isn't ranked in either poll. Nebraska is ranked. I think Nebraska is ranked in the AP poll, but not in the coaches poll. They're also 5-1.
Mm-hmm.
I'm annoyed. I know if they win this weekend, they'll vault in, but it annoys me that they're not ranked.
So I made like a mental note to ask Jedd Fisch about this, and I just ran out of time. There wasn't a good about like, hey, every coach, every player is going to say, we don't pay attention to the media, we don't care, blah, 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 distraction, eliminate distractions, all this. But like, set all that aside, is there a tangible benefit to your team being ranked right now? Like, we all know, okay, take care of business, win games. You'll either make the playoff or you don't. And like, that's what matters. The college football playoff rankings are what matter. And even those don't matter until the very last one, or so they say. But like, are you missing something as a program? Are you missing out on something? Some optics, marketing, hype component that you could seize on if you had a little number next to your name versus not, I guess. And like, and if I were to try to like scheme out here what his response would be, if you're, I don't know, like if you're flipping through channels or you're deciding what game to watch or you're looking at the ESPN scoreboard, here's the college football schedule for today. And you see Washington is playing at Michigan and neither team is ranked. But you see, little 24, little 25 next to Washington, ranked Washington is playing at Michigan. They're not ranked either. In fact, so if Washington's 28th receiving votes, Michigan's right ahead of them at 27th right now. Mm-hmm. So like pollsters think very similarly of Michigan and Washington. In fact, our pal Parker Fleming, by the way, I say our pal, I've never met him. There's no reason to think that he even knows who I am. But I say our pal because I cite his numbers all the time. His CFB graph site where he does like advanced stats matchups for each college football game. He's got Michigan by like 1.7 points in this game. So, I mean, this, in theory, like this is a very, very, very even matchup. And I guess I say all that to say about the top 25 poll that like, I do think there's benefit to being ranked versus not being ranked. Maybe there's also maybe there's more benefit to being able to tell your team, like, look at what we've done. Look at what we've done this first half. Look at how great Damon Williams Jr. and Jonah Coleman and Denzel Boston have played. Look at how exciting a brand of football we're playing, and no one believes in us. Everybody, whether you're being slighted or not, it seems like every team finds a way to convince themselves that no one believes them, and they use that as juice to some degree. But look, they play at Michigan this week.
Yes.
Big noon kickoff. Joel Klatt, Gus Johnson.
Yep.
Noon Eastern time. Ann Arbor, Michigan. The big noon kickoff show is not originating from Ann Arbor this week, but it is the big noon kickoff time slot and crew, I believe. You win that game, you'll be ranked.
Yes.
And then you got to turn around and beat Illinois. Like mm-hmm. Washington, Michigan, Illinois, and Nebraska are all kind of bunched up right now in the rankings. They cut it at 25. So Nebraska gets the number next to its name in the AP poll. And I believe Illinois is ranked in the coaches poll, but not in the AP poll. Mm-hmm. And look, Washington's got games against 2 of those 3 teams in the next 2 weeks. And if they beat them, they'll be ranked. And if they don't, then there's really no need to worry about it because this team's ceiling is going to be below making the playoff anyway.
I would think that Jedd Fisch would prefer to be ranked. And I base that off of him wearing the t-shirt, Where's Washington, after the initial poll last year, which is obviously a much different circumstance. But I do think Jedd is cognizant of that. For the most part, Jedd has been a no excuses, no whining. Like he hasn't complained about the schedule. But I do think he cares about the visibility at a national level, and certainly being ranked helps at least some degree to that. The biggest advantage that I see in being ranked, and this will take care of itself over the next 2 weeks, is what you mentioned of when it comes down to it, if you're a 2-loss Big Ten team being compared to a 3-loss SEC team, I can see this committee talking itself. There's just no doubt that national profile matters, and being mentioned nationally earlier helps in that regard. It's very, very minor. I just go back. It reflects how stupid it is to have polls early, because you just create a perception and sort of an implicit bias about where a team should be instead of just looking at how the games are played. Washington's got one loss. That one loss came to Ohio State in a game that it played respectably. It wasn't blown out. It wasn't throttled. It wasn't spanked. And then you just see where other teams are in comparison to that ranking. I mean, I know why USC is ranked where it is, and at 5-1 with a loss to Illinois, but it's you have a hard time convincing me that USC's overall body of work is that much better than Washington's, and that's going to be especially true if USC beats Michigan on the road. That's Washington's still going to be what they'll probably be north of 20, and USC is going to be in the top 10. And you can't convince me that that is based on objective results. It's about preconceptions and where things got set earlier in the season.
So speaking of the USC Michigan result, does that game, USC wins 31-13. They basically pushed Michigan around on both lines of scrimmage. And Michigan lost Justice Haynes in this game, the running back. He left with an injury. Sounds like there's a chance he'll play this week. Not like great clarity on that, so we'll see. But USC kind of Big Tend'em, right?
Little bit. Here's what's weird. I was actually excited. I was happy. I was happy that USC beat them, and I shouldn't have been. I should want Michigan to win that game, so if Washington beats them, it looks better. And Washington doesn't play USC, so you want USC to get a second loss. I was encouraged by watching the outcome of that game because my fear was that Washington's going to go in and get pummeled, like physically just outmatched by Michigan. And after watching the game against USC, I felt like I don't think this is going to be a game where Washington just gets overmatched on both sides, on both lines of scrimmage. Could be wrong about that, but I just came away feeling like this isn't going to be one of those games where Washington. I don't think Michigan is going to be able to run the ball like they did in the national championship game against Washington.
Yeah, and especially without Haynes.
Yeah.
And maybe he plays. I think Sharon Moore gave like an early week update and kind of said like, we'll, he should be good to go, but like not certain. And again, there's that, right? There's degrees of hurt. It's like, okay, well, maybe he'll play, but will he be the same? Will he be able to make it through the game? Like, I don't know exactly what the injury is, but did that game make you, did it make you feel, I guess, what was the greater feeling for you coming out of that game? That it gives you now feel better about Washington's chances against Michigan, or that you now think that USC is much better than you did before Saturday?
It's much more. I think the game against Michigan is much more. I came away feeling that is much more winnable for Washington. I was really impressed with Michigan's quarterback, Underwood, early on, and I think he looked more like a freshman quarterback in that game. And that if they're not able to run the ball, if they're not able to have a dominant run game, and you put pressure on his shoulders, I think Washington has the advantage at quarterback in this game. And I don't know if I would have been as certain about that early in the season, even as good as I felt about Damon Williams.
Yeah, you can see it with Bryce Underwood.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I buy that he'll get there.
Yep.
You can see the ability. He doesn't quite have it in the pass game yet, and maybe that's a function of like, this is not a program that has thrown the ball a bunch or well. JJ McCarthy obviously like did some special things, but even for like his first round draft pick quarterback, and like one of the narratives around him was like, well, but he's never been asked to like, really put it all on his shoulders or whatever.
Also, he looked like he was 12.
So when that's when that's how you play football and win, by the way, at an extremely high level, doing so. And now you do kind of have like the dynamo quarterback, but you've also got a great running back, and your program is built to run the ball. Like, they're going to run it first.
Yep.
That's what they've done. I think Underwood is last in the league in completion percentage among qualifying quarterbacks. Although I want to say Michigan's got like 14 drop passes or something like that. I was looking at their PFF numbers.
His receivers haven't done him a ton of favors. I think the point you made is really good, is that Michigan's system is not set up. At Maryland, they can't run the ball at all. But Maryland has said, okay, we're building things around our freshman quarterback. Michigan is very much not. We're gonna have the running game do the heavy work, and we believe that Underwood will develop and become a guy who maybe takes on a greater load later. But the system is certainly not set up to maximize him, or to cater to him. They'd like him to do as little as necessary to win games.
And it's maybe not the worst approach
No.
for a true freshman.
No, but I came away from that game feeling much more that Washington has a much better chance. I came away feeling encouraged.
Bryce Underwood actually has one more pass attempt this year in the same number of games than Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza do, which I would not have assumed.
So interesting. I saw ESPN.com. They came out with a mock draft today where they have Mendoza as the number 1 overall quarterback, or the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft, which surprised me. Almost as much as it surprised me that Mel Kiper has Dante Moore number 1 on his big board.
Isn't it wild what transferring to a Big Ten school will do for your profile?
Yeah.
Like, I liked Fernando Mendoza at Cal.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was really good for them. That was a bummer that they lost. He seemed to really like it at Cal. But I think, like, probably just, like, saw the writing on the wall. Like, man, if you want to get the buzz and really prepared, and also, like, go play for a really good program, like, Indiana's really good. You gotta. This leads me into then another, like, meandering, and now we don't need to spend any time on this, but, like, Will Leach, who's writing some for The Athletic now,
yep.
the Deadspin founder, or one of them, he made the point that, like, you know, Curt Cignetti's name is going to get brought up, is being brought up for the Penn State job. Is Penn State necessarily a better job than Indiana? Like, if Indiana's fully invested and you've got it going, and you're Curt Cignetti's age, like, they're undefeated and ranked number 3 in the country. They're in the same league. They're getting good players. Now, we'll see how the high school recruiting trends and all that. But, like, they've built a good team.
You know the answer to that, though, right? Like, the answer is no, it's not. Penn State is a much better job. The benefits at Indiana are you're not going to get fired. If you're a good coach, you're going to stay there. And I think you can be more competitive or better at Indiana now than you could have 5 or 10 years ago. But Penn State is one of maybe
it's plug and play.
Yeah, it's one of 10 programs that you can say each year this team, like, it's not unreasonable to say that this team should expect to be a top 10 team this year. Like, there's not very many places that are like that. Penn State is one of those. I am shocked they fired James Franklin. I probably shouldn't have been. $50 million is a huge buyout. I also went back and looked. So Tom Osborne's considered one of the great college football coaches ever, right? Spent a quarter of a century at Nebraska. He didn't win a national title until 1994. That was more than 20 years after he started. And he won another one and then a share. So he won 2.5 national titles there at the end of his run. But I only say that to say that I understand why James Franklin got fired. I also think if you're a college football coach, you look at that as like a flashing light about the changing standards in college football and what is going to happen at the top of some of these plum jobs.
It's almost like winning a national title forever and ever was not the most important thing in college football.
No, winning conference titles was. And I don't know if winning conference titles matters all that much anymore.
It doesn't. Assuming that Ohio State and Indiana do steamroll their way to the Big Ten championship game, which it sure seems like both are set up to do, In fact, I think both are set up to do it, even if Ohio State doesn't find a way to beat Michigan yet again. Who wants to win that game? Like, how important is it if they're both undefeated, both squarely in the playoff? How important is it to either of those programs to win that game? I think it's a lot more important to Indiana, frankly, because if you're the Indiana Hoosiers and you can say we just won the freaking Big Ten, like that's a big deal. Ohio State wasn't even in the Big Ten championship game last year, and they won the national title.
Look, there's going to be a lot of conversation about that because you see what happened. The teams that got the buys lost to teams that didn't get the buys. Like that's how it played out. And it's one sample year, and I don't expect that to be replicated again, but it really caused you to question exactly how much of an advantage is it to get a buy. As opposed to playing a game at home and coming in with momentum, because that's the one thing you know about the team. If you get a bye, you're going to be playing a team that's coming off a win.
So the way that manifests then, well, what do you mean? How does it matter? They're going to play. And what does it matter how much it means? They're going to play the game. Is like, would we see teams rest starters in a championship game? Or like at the very least, right, do what Ohio State has been doing the last couple years, which is, hey, we got a lot more games to play. Like maybe going out and, going balls to the wall trying to win this game is less important than let's manage pace, let's slow it down, let's limit plays, let's limit possessions. And you know what? If this game's closer than it should be, if and like Indiana might have reason to think the same thing, right? Especially if they're undefeated going into that game, like let's limit opportunities for injury. But then it's football. Like, what do I don't know. Yeah, you get in the moment and it's a conference championship game. You're going to want to win the thing. I'm not suggesting that like they wouldn't have competitive zeal or whatever, but it would be. It kind of goes back to what we've talked about, what a lot of people have talked about. Like, why are we still playing these conference championship games?
I don't know how to answer that question. I think naturally, in terms of coach strategy and how players feel about it, you're never going to convince. They're going to be trying their hardest. They're not going to expend any less effort. In terms of the larger picture, when you get into situations where you say, okay, take a step back and look at it, how much are you better off losing a conference title game and being the number 2, like the second team from your conference, or not playing in the conference title game, like Ohio State didn't play in the conference title game last year, and getting an extra week off and starting the playoffs? Like, I think those are the sort of the realities of, you can't, I don't know how much of an advantage, or I don't know how much of a disadvantage it will be to not play for a conference championship. I think it actually might end up being a net positive.
What's old IP think this week?
IP McFarland comes from acknowledging exactly the dominant storyline in local Seattle sports, which is not the Huskies this week. Although Washington could be nosing in, but we have a potential tectonic shift in the national state of college football. Here's our conversation with IP McFarland.
Good morning, guys. I'm recording early. It's Monday. I am one of many Southern Californians preparing for rain. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's a fair amount of rain. It's about 3 inches expected over the next 24 hours or so, which is a lot like when there's a 1/4 inch of snow predicted in Washington. People are battening down the hatches, stocking up on canned goods and ammunition. It's getting real. Christian, I hope you enjoyed the Mariners game Friday. Glad you could go. Assume you left around the 7th inning stretch. Turns out it was a pretty good game. I think the Mariners were probably the biggest story in American sports over the weekend, but a close second was the termination of James Franklin, which, wow. A ton of money. A shocking turn from number 2 team getting first place votes to very unlikely to make a bowl, and obviously searching for a new coach. And that is relevant to UW. Not only the state of big money terminations and hirings and whatnot, but just the carousel element. This is one of the few jobs where it's a trickle up rather than a trickle down on who they hire. The Penn State job is open. That is the tier just below the elite tier. Florida is likely to open, also on that tier. I don't think North Carolina or Virginia Tech are going to lure Jedd Fish, but UCLA is open. Wisconsin is likely going to open. I have heard Matt Rule be mentioned as a leading candidate. Nebraska could open. I've heard Brian Kelly be mentioned as a candidate, just to kind of reset the clock. That's obviously an elite job. My question is, what level of job is Jed going to leave for? Or is it just an NFL job? Because Washington's looking at kind of like a 9-3 season with FPI and S&P. Both are predicting that at this point, and the schedule kind of looks like that's where they're heading if the injuries don't overcome it. But I like Jed. I think I like him more than I expected to, but I don't like all the guys he would take with him. Obviously, Damon Williams is probably attached at his hip. My new favorite Husky, who, Christian, you gave us early warning on, and Desmond Roebuck. I'm afraid of the mass exodus, and unlike the 2023 one, which was unavoidable via graduation, this is a whole bunch of young guys that we're starting to fall in love with that could be out the door if Jed takes one of these jobs. So very curious your thoughts. Have a good week. Pray for Southern California. Go Dogs.
My thoughts on this haven't materially changed since I did the video mailbag a few weeks ago and got asked about it, specifically through the Billy Napier lens, because it was right after they'd lost to South Florida. I don't know if one win over Texas buys them enough goodwill. Their schedule continues to be pretty difficult. We'll see how it plays out here. It comes down to, like, just does Jedd Fish want to do this again? Does he want to rebuild again? And in college football, at certain places, it's easier to do the overnight turnaround thing than others. When you're at Florida, you've maybe got some more juice behind attracting key transfers to help you do that than at Washington. I think he's probably built like a good enough young core at Washington through the 25 and 26 classes, the latter of which obviously hasn't even signed yet. Maybe he's able to take, if he took some other job, and if it were Florida in particular, that he could take some number of those and feel like, okay, well, just having Damon Williams Jr. puts you way ahead of schedule in terms of a rebuild than like what he had at Washington. But you're still, at Florida, you're taking over for a coach who would have been fired. Walking into, if they're not a blue blood, they're darn close. They have extremely high expectations. The degree of patience will be far less than what it is at Washington. You're going to expect that thing to be like up and running tomorrow. Do you want to do all that again? Do you want to spend the amount of time you've spent, the hours, the constant wrangling of resources and conversations with administration and money people to make it happen? And, maybe that's not so much of a fight at Florida as it is at Washington. And maybe that'd be a reason why, that would be worth it, because I could skip all that. I continue to think that year 2 is a starter, but year 3 with Damon Williams Jr., with a stable core in one place where everybody knows each other, everybody knows the door codes for once. You're not asking guys to pick up and leave. I guess Damon Williams Jr. moved to Tucson. Like, don't forget that, right? He was those guys in that 24 class were early enrollees, had moved and had begun their lives in Tucson, and then picked up and came to Seattle. So, you're going to ask some number of them, and it'd be the smallest number, but some number of them to move again. And I'm not saying they wouldn't do it. I'm just saying, like, do you want to put everybody through this again? Or do you want to run it back year 3 with a group you feel good about, with some stability at a school that I think, to a far greater degree than this season, people will, and again, depending on how this last month and a half plays out, people will be talking about, and people will be mentioning as, like I said last week, the way they talked about Illinois going into this year, I think that could be Washington next year. If they do, like Ian kind of said, I mean, it feels like we argued last week, debated last week, 8-4 or 9-3. It feels like 9-3 is kind of the expectation now, that like you'd have to lose to Wisconsin, UCLA, or Purdue, or not beat Michigan, Illinois, or Oregon to not go 9-3. So it kind of feels like 9-3 is the expectation. The other piece of that is, and if it's not Florida, I think Washington is in a more advantageous position. Like, the UCLA thing should be absurd on its face, but I don't think it is. That doesn't mean I think it's likely. But like, I think we've heard enough about how much Jedd Fisch liked it in LA.
Mm-hmm.
UCLA is so hard because cut away everything that we've come to know about, like the commitment and the campus support and all those things, and their lack of NIL support under Chip Kelly and everything. And like, it should be a place that a coach who recruits well, and particularly has recruiting connections in Southern California, it should be a place that a coach with those connections feels like he can win if there are promises made about financial commitment. Who's UCLA's biggest financial backer? Casey Wasserman. Who's Jedd Fisch's agent? Wasserman. Who's on the hiring committee at UCLA? Casey Wasserman. And it should be said, like, his direct representation is Doug Hendrickson, who works at Wasserman. Casey Wasserman is the founder and owner of the agency. So that doesn't need to mean anything. But when Jedd Fisch's name is being floated for this job this early in the process, in some ways, like, if you're a Husky fan, that's comforting, because how often is the first name floated for a job that's not going to get filled for weeks, the guy that ends up being the hire? And how often is it an agent trying to get his guy paid?
Mm-hmm.
So the second piece of this is, what does Washington want to do? Does Washington value Jedd Fisch as its head coach enough to be leveraged over an opening that it's not convinced he actually wants? Maybe he does. Or would they see it instead as, like, it's the cost of doing business to have another year of DeMond Williams Jr. and this core? You're not buying the coach, you're buying the roster. You're not buying the coach, you're buying stability. So there's a number of factors at play, I think.
Yeah, there's a ton. So normally I would say this isn't the year that Jed would even make the strongest push to leave. It would be after next year. But that's in a pre-transfer window period, because now you can take the quarterback with you. And you can, in some cases, sell the idea of, hey, I'm coming here and you're getting a booster. I do assume that DeMond Williams would follow Jedd Fisch anywhere he went, as his quarterback. That would make the most sense to me. He's certainly blossoming. Jedd Fisch believes in him a ton. I think the question about UCLA is probably the more germane. That's the bigger threat to me than Florida, because I don't see Washington finishing better than 9-3 this year. If they do, then I think the chances of him leaving rise significantly. I don't think they're going to finish better than 9-3, and I'm not sure if a 9-3 record at Washington, with your longest stop being 3 years at Arizona, I'm not sure if that sells to Florida's boosters. Maybe it does. Maybe him going there and all of the references he'll bring about the old ball coach and being Steve Spurrier, maybe that does sell enough. I don't know about that. I think that question about UCLA is really significant because at UCLA, the one benefit that UCLA brings as a job is that it is not going to have the pressure that is associated or the short leash that is associated with some of those other jobs. That if you get the resources or if you're convinced you will get the resources, that's the one where if you got that program back to where it was in the 90s or in the 80s, you could stay there forever. And the reason that program has fallen off so much is really kind of an inexplicable lack of resources. UCLA also is getting a full media share of the current Big Ten deal. I tend to think that Jed, I tend to think that he is going to be in a stronger bargaining position after next season. So this might not be his biggest push. He might wait to see how this pans out because part of the reality is when you make it's hard to push to leave twice in 2 years. It's as a coach, you kind of get one major bite at the apple in your first 3 years at a job, and then you either have to leave or stay. But you can't do that 2 years in a row. It burns a lot of equity with the institution. If he were to be talked into staying this year, would he then push to leave again next year? I'm not so sure his bargain. I tend to think he'll make his bigger push or be a hotter commodity next year, but I could be wrong because we're living in a different world, and anybody that tells you they know how this is going to play out is lying to you because we've never seen hiring cycles with the kind of resources that some of these programs have, combined with the desperation that some of them have. UCLA is going to have access to more resources than it has had previously. Its NIL is still a mess, but there are so many moving parts with so many different things that I don't think you can base a decision about what is and isn't an attractive job based on what happened 5 years ago.
UCLA has no choice but to make the head football coach job more attractive than it's ever been by a significant degree.
You had a coach leave to become an offensive coordinator at Ohio State. And this is you hired a former player who had basically no experience and it was a disaster. If you don't make a bold hire here, you're basically saying we are not competing in football. We are a basketball school. And I don't think that's what UCLA is going to do.
And, the salary that they can get matters and the alignment with the AD, people are not happy with Martin Jarmond and there's a lot of reasons to stay away from that job if you are a sitting Big Ten head coach at a school that is looking at, maybe an 8 or 9 win season and believes it's on the rise. I should say cut everything away. And will I be surprised if Jedd Fisch winds up at UCLA? I will not be stunned.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
I think that's accurate. I think when it comes down to it, he would not go to UCLA. But it wouldn't be the wow, I never saw that coming. Do you think Florida's a threat?
I mean, sure, but I think like Penn State, I agree with you that they would probably set their sights on somebody with a little longer track record as a head coach. And I don't know how much it matters to them that he's an alum and the connection to Steve Spurrier and all that.
Yeah.
I think it would matter a lot more if Washington went 10-2.
Yeah, see, that's kind of what I see. If they went 10-2, I could see that. I could see him going. But given given the way Lagway's turned out as a quarterback, are they going to be oh my gosh, we're going to get Damon Williams? I think Florida's fan base will see it differently than we think they will. Whereas UCLA would be this guy's the home run hire.
Yeah. And that's something I've been thinking about too, that if Jed Fish is far and away the candidate who is most receptive to talking to them, if it's Jed Fish and then the interest is a precipitous downfall from Jed Fish, then it's okay, we're going to throw everything at this guy. this is by far the best coach who's interested in this job. So let's just we can't let him off the hook. Pardon the terrible pun there, but like we've got this guy on. Like we can't let like our offer and the resources that we put together and the financial commitment that we make for the program and NIL and all so on and so forth. We can't let that be the reason that he says no. So that part of me wonders if like that's a factor too. And then you add in the fact that like one of the potential big money people in that situation literally owns the agency that represents Jedd Fisch. And it's like, I think you'd be a little foolish to just dismiss it out of hand.
I'm so jaded about agents now. Like coach agents.
The way the world is, man.
Given the whole Jimmy Sexton thing of like, yeah, that speaks to it right there. And also Wasserman is a much different businessman than Jimmy Sexton is. It's not even the same model. Like Wasserman's history and his work in sports in general has a much broader footprint than anything.
He's the head of the LA Olympic Committee.
Exactly.
I
Like
believe.
you're talking about someone who is a big generational influence on Southern California sports. That's not Jimmy Sexton is a heavyweight coach agent. Like that's his bread and butter. That Wasserman is a much more diverse force.
But there are some parallels though, because how many Sexton guys got paid off of Nick Saban retiring?
Yeah. At least 4 that I can think of. Sark, Norvell, DeBoer. I mean, three just clear right off the top. Like that was directly Nick Saban's retirement got huge pay raises to each of those 3 guys.
So if you are an agent involved in a coaching search and you have an opportunity to get multiple clients paid, like Jed Fish can get paid off the UCLA opening without being hired by UCLA.
For sure.
So I don't know. I see his name floated early on in the process, and just, I guess, kind of history tells me that this feels like an agent doing his job. Like this feels like an agent trying to get his guy paid. But I also am not dismissing out of hand the possibility that Jedd Fisch might be interested in that job.
I could see a lane where that happens. I don't think it's the most likely avenue, but I could see a sequence of events where that ends up being the decision. If this is the other thing, if he takes that path, he's also committing himself for a period of time to UCLA, because the ability to then go get another job, what UCLA is going to have to give up to get him, it's going to be a much different play than Washington made to get Jedd Fisch. Jedd Fisch has an awful lot of power because of the situation Washington was in. I would think if for UCLA to put together the kind of deal that it would take to make him go from Washington to UCLA, he's going to give up a significant amount of flexibility.
And again, part of that deal, I think, would be an unprecedented financial commitment to the football program at UCLA. And so are they in position to do that? And number of factors. I know people don't like to hear let it play out, but let it play out.
I don't care how big a financial commitment they're going to be. They're not going to have a field. Like that is one of the realities of it. I could see a scenario where UCLA makes a huge financial offer to him. It's harder for me to think that he's going to get the kind of facilities that a facilities upgrade at UCLA over Washington. I mean, even just making it equal would be a significant stretch from where UCLA is now.
We're going on 70 minutes here. We might have to bag the Pac-12 power ranking. Suffice
Oregon's
it to say,
still on top.
The Oregon schools are still our borders here.
Yeah.
Everyone falls between the Oregon schools.
Do you have Washington? We'll just do to Washington. Oregon, then do we go Utah, USC, or Washington? Or do we go, how exactly Utah with a victory over Arizona State?
Yeah, I'm gonna give USC the 2 spot for beating Michigan, and then Utah, and then Washington.
Nah, I'm going Washington ahead of Utah.
That's fair. They got smacked. Granted, they got smacked by what quite likely looks like a playoff team that'll probably be undefeated going into the playoff. But
final note: did you know that San Diego State's 5-1?
I did. So I was just. I messaged some buddies the other day, and I was like, man, the Wazoo's win over San Diego State sure is holding up well.
That's all we looked at was like, how bad is San Diego State? Only game they've lost.
Oh, they're never going to lose again.
Yeah, they've got good wins. That's a pretty good win over Cal. They whooped Cal.
Yeah. They destroyed them.
Yeah.
I think they just beat Nevada. Nevada's going through it. But, 5-1 is 5-1.
All right, man. Go Mariners.
Indeed. I have a feeling there'll be a decent Washington contingent at the big house. Seems like a trip that folks circle. So if you're traveling, safe travels. Enjoy the game however you watch it come 9 a.m. Pacific time Saturday. We still operate on Pacific time here.
It's noon.
No. It's a Pacific time podcast. We'll talk to you next week.
Nobody likes you. You are an outsider. We don't like you.